Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Jeremy here at the Yankton Library. I will be moderating this panel tonight. We have a light crowd here in the room, but we're expecting a nice crowd online. So if anybody watching this on their phone or at home or wherever you're watching it, you can leave a comment in the chat and we'll get to it. And then the folks here in the room, if you have a question, is everybody okay with kind of a free-flowing question? You guys can raise your hand and we'll get to you, and you can direct your question to whoever you'd like. Okay, we do have the two mics that we'll trade off so everybody at home can hear us pretty clearly. I want to thank all the guys for coming down and agreeing to this. We made it work. We will have some door prizes, so anybody watching online, you will be eligible too. We'll just, I'll write down your name and we'll put it in our jar. And then the two gentlemen in the room with us today, pretty likely you'll leave with something today. Okay, so what we can do is real quick, I can pass the mic on down to James and we can go down the line. If anybody, if you guys want to introduce yourself, your organization, how long you've been there, we'll leave it up to you. We'll get the ball rolling.
I'm James Cimburek. I've been at the Press Dakotan since '92, sports editor since '96.
I'm Joe Van Goor. As of a week ago, Saturday, August 17th, I am no longer with 5 Star Communications. And but 48 years plus in radio, 40 plus years in sports.
This way. Yeah, Jerry Oster, as of June 1st last year, retired from WNAX there, 46 and a half years, 49 years in radio. I was mostly in news, but got a lot of sports in my time. Some high school, mostly South Dakota State, and now the network producer for the Jackrabbit Sports Network. So even though I'm retired and part-time, still got my hand in it.
Bryce Ladwig, sports director of KYNT and KYNT TV. I've been with KYNT since 2019, in Yankton Media since 2017, and thanks for having me, Jeremy.
And I am 25 years old compared to these guys. So I'm definitely the young guy here. I'm Tehl Tanner. I'm the voice of Mount Marty University Athletics here for KYNT and Yankton, working alongside Bryce here. So we're having a good time with that.
So there is a wide range of experiences in what everybody's covered. That kind of leads me to the first question, just based on all of our experience in media. We've all covered everything from, like, as Jerry mentioned, Division I athletics, Division I football, all the way down to senior baseball and youth soccer. So there's a wide range. If everybody can kind of go through and maybe start by sharing one memorable highlight that comes to mind right off the top of your head in all those years and all those different activities in sports. Does anything stand out to everybody?
That's a tough one. I've had the opportunity to cover multiple state championships for Mount Marty, or for Yankton, a couple of national events for Mount Marty, a couple national events for USD, so on and so forth. I guess one early on that sticks out is my last year of part-time in 1994. I was covering the Class 11B championship game between Bonholm and Harrisburg, two communities that are definitely gone different directions in terms of size. One being 9-man, the other being AAA now. But Bonholm won the championship 7-6, and that ended up being my first state newspaper award.
Well, 40 plus years, I think covering Yankton High School has been my biggest joy. Got to cover the Bucks and Gazelles at regular season and state tournaments. Certainly the AA title for the boys in 2023 and the AA boys title in 2018 were special because, well, quite frankly, Yankton hadn't won a boys basketball championship in 40 years, and I was on the last one back in 1978. But as far as others, I was voice of Mount Marty for 14 combined years and going to national tournaments, especially with the men in 1998 when they made the Fab Four, as they call it. They can't call it the Final Four because that's a trademark. And there's just so many other events that I've covered: baseball, softball, basketball, football, college, and high school. But I think those events that I covered for Yankton High School, and with football championships too, are ones that I'll always remember.
I remember you were on that state tournament team. I was working at WNAX. We carried that game when the Bucks won, 78. Yeah, same thing. At the time I've been, like I said, mostly news, but in sports, that there's a lot of things that stand out. I had a game, I did play-by-play when I was at USD Springfield on our college station that we fed back to Rapid City with South Dakota Tech and USD Springfield. Doug Schlett playing for Tech and Lon Nelson for Springfield. This is before the three-point shot, and Tech won 121 to 119 in regulation. It was a pretty crazy game. That stands out. And of course, at South Dakota State, I was in Frisco this last January national championship. I got to see the second one. That was pretty special. So, I mean, there's numerous things to look back to, but that first basketball game really that I did play-by-play on stands in my memory. That was pretty crazy and helped convince me how important and how much fun sports can be.
I do play-by-play.
In my time of covering Yankton Bucks and Gazelles, had a lot of really fun games to cover. Various state tournament trips, Yankton Bucks, the state tournament. The 2023 state championship game was also a lot of fun. Although my favorite game of that entire tournament was the semifinal matchup with Sioux Falls Jefferson. That was a really fun game. And to cheat your answer, I have multiple. I have state tournaments for hosting the Legion state tournaments on KYNT TV, carrying that as a company. And just overall, the creation of KYNT TV is kind of what's brought me the most joy in my job.
I'm noticing I get to think a little bit more about my answers too, so this is really nice. I'm enjoying this. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for putting me on this side. When it comes to some of the big games, I've only been doing this for a couple years, but I've actually been really lucky in some of the things that I've been able to do, and a lot of that just comes to where I was. Obviously, with what we do, you don't always get the big games, so you got to enjoy them when they come. So when I was at USD, I started out with USD volleyball, and I actually got to call their very first outright tournament championship in the Summit League over in Denver. I got to do that my sophomore year of college, got to cover the first regular season outright win in the Summit League for the volleyball team. My very first play-by-play experience ever was actually USD football versus Kansas State down in Manhattan, which was definitely an interesting first. And obviously a bunch of basketball Summit League tournaments for the Yotes. And then over at Mount Marty, I've been able to do a bunch of fun things, including the very first season ever of Mount Marty University football, their first win of their presentation, a couple of the really big wins, including the Midland win last year where they put up 21 points in the fourth quarter to beat a very good team on the road, and a lot of basketball games, including a couple that got on Sports Center for an incredible shot with 0.8 seconds to go, a three-pointer to win it last year, which was super fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to do more. I get to do football, volleyball, men's, women's basketball, softball, baseball, and state tournaments, obviously, for high school as well. I got to do some in a state tournament in Nebraska for football, covering Cedar Catholic Norfolk a couple years ago, which was super fun. And yeah, I'm having fun. I've been able to do a lot in a couple years. Not as much as y'all, but it's been.
I was planning to ask something about this anyway, but just kind of seeing everybody here, I used to think this, full disclosure, worked for James for 15 years at P&D, how unique Yankton is, at least in my opinion, in a town of, 14 or 15,000 people, to have this level of media, the different stations that cover or have covered local and area sports, the daily newspaper, there's a weekly newspaper in Yankton as well. I don't know, how about you guys? So what's it like being a media personality in a really small market like Yankton?
Let him start over there, since he can't think.
Put him on the spot.
That was rude. I think I did it to myself. I can't blame you, but still. Yeah, so being a media personality in Yankton, there's a phrase that I have used the last couple of years when it comes to this town that I'm pretty new to. Yankton is different. It just feels different when it comes to sports coverage, when it comes to the fan support. You walk into Crane Youngwood Field on Friday nights, and it is just insane, the level of support that they give the local high school team. And then the college team on Saturdays as well. It's just different. I didn't see that growing up on a very, very small town. I went to a town of 700 people growing up over in the western side of South Dakota, and I never got to experience anything like that until I came over here. And then I've been talking to some of the other, obviously I cover Mount Marty University and the GPAC. I've been talking to some of the other GPAC announcers, and they all pretty much agree that Yankton has some pretty good coverage, because we've got 2 full-time guys at our station that do sports, and most of the other guys I've been able to talk to in the area, they're lucky to get 1 full-time guy. A lot of these guys are part-time and have to do other stuff. So Yankton is just different, and it's super cool.
Well, like Tehl said, when I'm asked about Yankton high school coverage, I tell people I don't cover I don't cover high school athletics. I cover Yankton high school athletics. There's a difference. Like Tehl said, the support this community gives its athletic programs with high school and the university level is second to none in the state. And as far as being a media personality within this town, I love it. I love knowing these athletes, getting to know them, the personal relationships that you form with the coaching staff, and with the parents of the athletes as well. You really just kind of become a very far away part, but part of the team in a way. And the community as a whole can all join in on the success and just the joy as the season really unfolds. And it truly is special.
Yeah, with WNAX being with 5-state coverage, it's and the Jackrabbits, yeah, you get recognized a lot, but I grew up in Aberdeen, and being from South Dakota, you know how we are, everybody's related, so you kind of know folks anyway. So it's always nice to get out, whether it's a tailgate at the state or even at the USD games, you find people or they know you from being on the radio. So, that helps a lot. It's been pretty nice over the years. And you did make a good point, and I think you got to think about Yankton also this way, is that the flagship stations for both D1 universities are in Yankton, and we have Mount Marty University being covered here. I mean, for one smaller city in South Dakota, that's pretty significant, because our network radiates from here to 8 stations, and USD has, I don't know, 5 or 6 now probably, I think. So, I mean, Yankton's really unique in that, in terms of connection to the big universities of the state and a growing university that these guys do. So, yeah, that's very significant.
Well, when I got a gentle push from the late Norm Hilson in January of 1984 to do games, my first ever game was in Creighton, Nebraska, at the old Knox County Boys and Girls Invitational Basketball Tournament. The late Norm Hilson had another term for it. Jerry knows that one. I, had to grow up on the radio real fast on a 5-state station. That's where I made, my mistakes. But it was more of a regional type of coverage where and my first football game was in September of 1984 down in Plainview, Nebraska, Bloomfield and Plainview, which was a traditional opener for WNAX in high school football. And of course, traveling all around until I started doing Yankton High School in the late 90s full time. What these gentlemen have talked about is the overwhelming community support, and the fact that the coaches made me feel welcome. I mean, it was nice to cover one team and have to worry about another every week. But when I was working for WNAX, I had to learn 2 different teams every week in high school football and in basketball. You just show up. Can I get a lineup? Yeah, okay. Well, you spend the first quarter getting to learn, 2 teams. But that's what, covering Yankton as long as I did, with the fan support, the student athletes, covering student athletes, relationship with coaches and the fans as well. And I hope, certainly, I served them well.
And since they talked about the coaches and the fans, I'm going to take this another route. In terms of being a media member here in Yankton, it's just an amazing place to learn. I nowhere else in this size of community, are you going to see 3 different radio ownership groups, 2 different newspapers, and everybody pretty much gets along. I mean, when I started here in the 90s, I could call on Joe or Scott Kustra or Jerry to get some help, or occasionally get a ride to a game. And I've tried to do the same. I mean, Bryce started his career working for me, and I've tried to do the same with Bryce and Tehl and everybody else. That to be that resource, be that old guy that can help out, and I've been so lucky to have had that myself.
Hearing our radio friends talk about, the fact that we have current and previous voice of different schools, and everybody on that side of the room has that experience. What are the responsibilities that come with being the quote unquote voice of, Mount Marty, Yankton, South Dakota State, USD, or whatever the case is? Any responsibilities that come along with that?
Well, you gotta get the story right, first of all. And the responsibility is just to tell the story of what you're seeing, football, basketball, or whatever else it is, and to not necessarily be a homer, even though we're in front of that team, tell the story, tell people what you're seeing, relay to them the atmosphere of what's going on there, and carry that message. I mean, that's what we're here for. At least when we do South Dakota State as a flagship station, we also have responsibility to the network stations to make sure that everything's run the way it needs to be for them. A lot of those, they're dependent on us to hit our marks and hit our spots and do everything that we need to do. So yeah, that there is a responsibility and you feel it, but you want to make sure you get the story right and tell it to your listeners.
I agree on getting the story right, do the best job you can, but also there is a responsibility I feel that I have as a voice of Yankton Bucks and Gazelles, that these student athletes, when they graduate and they start living their college days and then beyond, your voice will be forever associated with them and their memories that they made in high school, during probably, for some of them, some of their best memories they're going to have. And so I really do my best and try to keep in my mind that I will forever be associated with some of these athletes. And I just hope that I can do them justice.
As soon as you asked that question, I was actually reminded of a piece of advice I got when I first started in this job, because I was just starting out and I did the exact same thing James was talking about, of asking some of the guys around for some help. And so I asked kind of my mentor, who taught me broadcasting in the area, and what I asked him about was, in calling some high school football, one of the hardest things to do is call a blowout. No matter what team you're covering, it's hard to do, because in that fourth quarter, when it's 50-6, what do you talk about? And do you bring too much energy? Do you just kind of mellow back because it's what's going on? And what he told me was, it doesn't matter. For the kids on the field right now, that's the coolest thing happening in their lives right now. That is the coolest thing happening in their lives right now. And you owe it to those kids to continue to give them your best effort. It doesn't matter if the score is 50-6. You still owe it to those kids, because that's the coolest thing in their lives right now. And that stuck with me. So for all of the athletes that I kind of cover, that's what's going on for them. That is their passion. That is what makes them happy. And then I'm doing them an injustice if I'm not giving it my best effort as well. So I just owe it to them.
Well, after being a radio voice for the University of South Dakota State for a short time, Mount Marty University, Yankton High School, and the area schools, who you're working for is the listener. And of course, with doing a game that you really don't have a stake in, and this may sound kind of funny, but you try to give your effort to both schools. And of course, with the colleges and universities that I've covered, you're working for them. You're working for their fans to be an extension of what their programs are at now and trying to be in the future. I mean, after after so many games, after 40 plus years, it's, you know, it all kind of runs together. But the thing I learned early on from the late Norm Hilson was to do the job, work for your listeners, because they're the ones that will eventually have a say of what kind of job you do.
How about social media? Everybody up here has or had or currently does utilizes social media in what they do. That's probably evolved over James and Jerry and Joe's career. Can you guys speak to how it's evolved and how it's now become part of your ongoing coverage?
Well, it's just one more way to tell the story. I mean, with us, we don't have, as a print medium, we don't necessarily have the video that would, the video access normally through our print. So, okay, now with social media, I can share a clip from the last minute of the game or a big play if I'm shooting it, and it gives me one more way to reach and serve our readers.
With me and social media, it's just more promoting what you're doing. You know, okay, we're going to be on this station, we're going to be on this stream. It's just more for promotion. And, you know, sometimes you're just so concentrated on doing the game, you know, you're not giving quarter scores or anything like that. I, you know, sometimes prefer to wait, you know, until that to, you know, to pass along. But as far as social media, it's just more promotion of what, you know, the stations are doing and hoping that, you know, people will tune in.
As obviously the young guy in the panel, I think I'd probably look at social media a little bit differently because I've never known anything but social media, you know, growing up with it. I'm not gonna lie, my whole life I hated it. I was not somebody who liked it, which I feel like is a little more rare for somebody my age. But I hate posting online. It just drives me crazy. But one thing I do like, and I really do like this, is something y'all touched on. I love connecting with the parents of some of these athletes. That is super fun. Every now and then after a Lancer game or anything going on, I'll get a parent from an athlete who played well that day and heard me call them. They'll get in my social media DMs or at me on Twitter or something and just thank me for what's going on or say, hey, this is really cool. And that's super cool. So I love connecting with the fans and social media. Absolutely. That is special.
Social media is very important in today's media landscape. It's a very important way to fuse traditional media with the media of now, which is social media. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, I can go on and on. What else? TikTok? Whatever else is going on. It's all very important. Content is king. The more that you can reach out to social media followers, the better off you are. It can be a lot of extra work, but that's just kind of what needs to be done. And I think it's a vital tool at times as well to keep everyone kind of in the same loop.
Yeah, well, I was doing sports back in the day before we even had dial-up internet. So yeah, right back in the black and white days. With the Jackrabbit Sports Network, we're fortunate we have people that are doing social media during the game. They'll upload video clips during the game to TikTok, to X, Twitter, even Facebook. One of the things that's taken off for the Jackrabbits is they do a booth cam now, where we've come up with a separate audio feed, so we don't give them the closed circuit stuff. We give them the actual broadcast feed from the booth, and it's just a camera that shows the guys in the booth, their actions, reactions, and that's got an amazing response. You know, I mean, it's like when we were talking about how we could do this, I thought, you guys are nuts, but it really works well. So, and I gotta say, in the word of social media, you guys with KYNT TV is pretty amazing. It looks like your numbers keep going up. So that's been a very impressive offering, I think. So, and I'm sure they're trying to monetize it as best they can, right? So yeah, social media for even as old folks. It's very important. And it's part of, again, telling the story and engaging the consumers out there. Not always listeners, but now consumers.
It, almost to that point too, not that everybody up here necessarily, well, I don't want to speak for everybody, but necessarily quote unquote competes with each other, but in what we were talking about within a small market, is there some of that where, James and I are competing maybe with, maybe I'll say it this way, maybe somebody at a similar outlet at a smaller town comparatively to Yankton, or is there like an inner city competition that goes on, like you want to call this game better than them, or is there any of that? Not to put you guys on the spot, but is there any of that? I mean, I know everybody's competitive, but
Rustling feathers over here. Yeah, there's competition in Yankton, between, Joe would say the same, I'm assuming, KYNT and KVHT. We cover the same exact sport, same teams. And yeah, I would like to think it's an overall friendly competition, and I would never wish ill on anyone or not talk to Joe, and I would appreciate the same reciprocation, of course. But yeah, I want to be the best coverage available. As before Joe left, Joe would say the same thing when he was with KVHT, I'm assuming, let him talk to that. But, you want to be the best. But it also, like James was saying earlier, it's also very important to maintain relationships. You don't need to hold hands across the bridge. You don't want to burn it either, And so that's just kind of my statement on that.
Yeah, when it comes to the competition thing, obviously with Mount Marty, we get a little more exclusive rights, so that's not too big of a deal for me. I do cover a lot of high school stuff, especially in the Nebraska area, and there's some competition there. But for me, when it comes to competition, if you're focusing on the other guy, you've already lost. So I really don't think about it that much. I'm just focusing on what I can do, and if I'm doing a good job, hopefully I'm getting listeners. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm kind of doubling back on what those guys said. As long as you're focusing on what you can do best, because obviously I'm not the speaker that these guys are. I think we've already established that. But as long as I'm telling the story as best I can, and hopefully finding a way to tell it that might be a little bit different from those guys, and is something that our readers appreciate, then I'm doing my job.
I was told a long time ago, because there were times early on in my career, and we're talking 40 plus years ago, that you worried about the other guy, or the other, if you go to a game, another station shows up, well, you get upset. And again, sage advice from the late Norm Gilson: worry about your own stuff. People will judge you on the job that you do, and if they'll come back or not. I don't worry about it. I've got a broadcast to do to make sure we're on, make sure commercials are being played, make sure the information that I have about teams that I'm doing is correct, and then I'm portraying that. So I just worry about my own stuff and try to do the best I can.
Yeah, as I say, we did South Dakota State, and there's always the rivalry with USD, but it's a natural rivalry. But in terms of broadcasters, we always got along, because you never know, you might break a cord, hey, you got a cord I can borrow type of thing. So yeah, you don't want to burn any bridges, like these guys have said, and yeah, worry about your own stuff, worry what you can do for your listeners. And the other thing I've learned over the years, if the other guy's doing something interesting, don't be afraid to borrow it. If there's something going on that you see that you think, yeah, that's kind of interesting, you can always adapt. So yeah, friendly competition's not a bad thing.
and sometimes you need to borrow somebody else's hotspot, as Bryce mentioned earlier. Sometimes you need some help. So something that Tehl said a little bit ago reminded me, this question is going to sound out of order from our conversation about Yankton being unique. How about the fact that we straddle two states? That's an interesting dynamic for Yankton. I know for James and I for years is you juggle Nebraska, the schools in your area, your coverage area in Nebraska, on top of everything in South Dakota. So that's unique too.
Yeah, I mean, before the basketball volleyball season switch in 2002-03, it was even more so because you'd start covering girls basketball in August, and by the time you're done covering basketball, it's late March. And that's just kind of the way it was. And I do appreciate that all my basketball is from October to March now, unless somebody makes a really deep run. But and yeah, that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, Nebraska has a little different schedule than South Dakota, and sometimes it works out where they're not on the same days, and sometimes it doesn't, and you just kind of deal with it.
Well, as I said back in 1984, that's where I started. A girls basketball game in Creighton, Nebraska, and then a football game in Plainview, Nebraska. I, certainly enjoy, not only obviously the relationships I've had for 40 plus years here in South Dakota, but in Northeast Nebraska as well. There's and of course things are changing. Streaming is becoming important, to these schools in Northeast Nebraska. Really, you have to kind of gauge on how schools are receptive, because I can remember going to Osmond, Nebraska. It was an Osmond and Bloomfield game, and the superintendent or the athletic director at Osmond said, "Well, we'll let you come, but you can't get any advertising from town." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because if the game's on the radio, that means people are going to stay home and listen to it rather than come to the game." I said, "Sir, you are deadly wrong, because people in small towns will support their athletic teams. And despite the fact that we had like maybe regional sponsors for that game, the place was full." And I went up to the superintendent after the game, and I said, "Well, I hope your gate was good tonight." He goes, "Gosh, I thought with it being on the radio, nobody would come." And I go, "Well, you've learned your lesson."
Yeah, like Joe said, we did games in Nebraska for a number of years at WNAX. That became economically unfeasible over the years, especially as we turned toward more South Dakota State, with more coverage there as we pick up women's basketball, split schedule, or the mirrored schedule, God bless them. Things like that. It just became too busy, but and it was also a function of our signal, especially our nighttime signal. About 60% of our listeners in South Dakota, about 30% in Nebraska. So that became a function of it. We did carry University of Nebraska football for a time, and that was always a struggle. They never were really happy that we were carrying Nebraska for some reason. In fact, one year we wanted to carry the Nebraska-Oklahoma game, and Nebraska wouldn't. You remember that? They wouldn't give us permission, so we went to the Oklahoma network and carried their feed of the game. That didn't interest any Nebraska.
And that lasted probably 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, that was about it. Yeah.
And it was the Nebraska.
And Nebraska folks weren't happy.
They weren't happy. No.
So you try to give listeners what they want, right? Never works that way.
I just schedule our Nebraska coverage. I mainly focus on the Yankton High School and the KYNT TV operations. So I'll turn over to Tehl. He actually does our games of the week for Nebraska.
Yeah, when it comes to our Nebraska coverage, a lot of it is kind of what Jerry was touching on, of knowing your audience and working for the audience as we were there. So we've got a couple of different stations in our Riverfront Broadcasting umbrella that we work with daily, and they all kind of have different audiences. One of them is very Yankton, South Dakota centric. I don't really talk about what's going on in Norfolk when I'm on that station. Another one, it is really about the music. They want to hear about Beyonce. They don't want to hear me talking. That's just kind of what it is. And then the third station, absolutely. I talk about Nebraska sports on it all the time. So it's kind of just knowing your audience and what you need to do, which station you're on, who wants to actually hear the information you're giving to them, because otherwise they're just going to turn the dial. So when it comes to Nebraska athletics, is absolutely your family just walked in the door. So
it's either get really loud or I'm not.
our two folks in the room. Do you guys have any questions for these guys?
Of course.
Go ahead.
James, how do you determine what to put in the paper on a weekly basis? With all the little teams, all the big games, everywhere?
That's well, it's not as easy as 10 years ago, I would get 2 to 4 pages per day. These days I get 1 and have to kind of figure out what I need to put on that. The focus is always local. I mean, if I'm going to choose between an AP story or a local story, I'm putting the local story in. In terms of choosing between this, that, or the other locally, I just kind of try and figure out what works best and go from there.
How far out do you go?
I call it, how I see it all the way to Platch, all the way to Dakota Valley on the South Dakota side, and then Randolph, Laurel, Wausau on the Nebraska side.
Yeah, let me just say, my point of view, James and the PD, they do a heck of a job in covering local sports. They really do. You look at other papers around the state, and these guys are right there. I mean, and they work at it because that local stuff, I mean, that's all them. It's not given to them. They got to go out and get it. You know, it's not just showing up on the wire, getting emailed to you for the most part. They got to set it up. So I give them a lot of credit. And, you know, their local page, their local sports is top notch.
Ken, do you have any questions for these guys?
Not right now, thanks.
Okay. Let us know if one comes.
Yeah.
I got one for Joe and Jerry. USD, SDSU, how much time do you get to plan the game, get the names, get the positions, get all the stuff that's going on?
Well, I discovered traveling with the late Norm Hilson starting in the fall of 1984 that, you know, sports information directors are just as vital as a key as anything as far as preparation. But of course, we're talking about snail mail at the time. You normally back then, sports information directors would have to make their game notes on Monday so they could send them out. So, you know, other media outlets and Norm would get that, and that's how his preparation. I mean, for when I did high school football, I would call the 2 schools on Monday, talk to the coaches, and say, this is what I need. I need a roster, put starters on it. If you got some stats, send them. And I'd be lucky if I got it back on Thursday or even Friday morning. So when thermal paper packs came, I mean, it was like, you know, a light had shined through, and then plain paper flags, and now emails and everything like that, where you can get information, or you can look on the website for this kind of information. I just don't think people realize how tough it was back then to get information. And, you know, besides South Dakota State, you have to rely on somebody from North Dakota or North Dakota State sending you stuff down from Fargo. And when you get it, you know, that, you know, it doesn't really leave you a lot of time for prep.
Yeah, I would say when I was traveling, especially when we were traveling with SDSU, when Coach Stiglmeyer came along, Stig was amazing in that when we were on the road with a team, we could go to any meeting, we could talk to any player, any coach, anytime. He had no restrictions on that. We could go to any offensive, defensive strategy meeting, which helped immeasurably. And traveling with the team, you really get to know them, and you get to know their families and everything else. So that's really nice. And I remember I thanked Stig one day for that, because he doesn't realize how unique that is in the coaching or in the sports world. And he looked at me like, well, you're part of the team. I mean, that's how he treated us as a media. We flew with him on the plane. A lot of teams don't allow that, for the media to fly with them and things like that. So the preparation now, and like Joe said, it's improved immeasurably with email. We get inundated with information. And the guys now on the Jackrabbit Sports Network, I mean, they're in Brookings, so they get that daily, they practice daily. So yeah, they're very well versed in what they do. So yeah, changed a lot and much better. You need to talk to your son. When were you here?
I actually want to add to this. Anyone that covers college level or up, you get no sympathy from me at all. You get your game notes at all. You get them directly mailed to you. I have to call coaches, assistant coaches, email them, call the school, and try to get them to answer sometimes. I'm not going to name any schools, Brookings, but you get no sympathy from this entity.
And live stats too.
And live stats. I had to keep my own stuff. You know what? No sympathy at all, actually. And shame on you for trying to get any.
Future left tackle for the Yankton Bucks, Mark Ladwig here. Hey, we're on radio, we can't handle that.
Do we want to talk before we wrap it up? Do we want to talk about the fall football season? Yankton, Marty? We won't put you on, we won't quote you on a record or anything, but maybe just your outlook for Marty?
Yeah, absolutely. For Mount Marty football this year, it's definitely going to look a little different, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball, they've got a lot of familiar faces that are going to be returning this year. A couple of new additions, obviously, every year that happens. But the offensive side of the ball is what's going to look different. I can tell you this upcoming Saturday when they go down to Missouri, face Goor Stockton, you're going to see a new quarterback one. You're going to see a new wide receiver one. You're going to see a new running back one. That's different. The offensive line is mostly the same, and that's good. You still get guys like Rex Riken, who have been in the program for a long time. That's good. But you get a new young quarterback in Rugby Riken, a guy that I don't think anybody in this room has ever heard his name before. But you get Rugby Riken starting at quarterback. You're going to get, obviously, new running backs and new wide receivers. But it's going to look different on the offensive side of the ball with a couple of younger guys. But one thing that is really, really good is, especially for that young quarterback, he's got a veteran pass catching room. Obviously, the wide receivers and the tight ends are all very old, and they have a good connection with them because a lot of them are from Yankton. And then the defensive side of the ball, they're pretty senior laden as well. So I'm looking forward to a pretty good year for Mount Marty. You know, the GPAC is so incredibly strong when it comes to football. There have been 8-9 years it takes some programs to get to 2-3 wins, and they got to 3 wins in 2 years, which was insane for them to do that. And hopefully they're going to keep rolling from there. I'm hoping for prediction wise, I'm really hoping they finish above 500. That would be a very good year.
I'm excited for all Yankton fall sports, but if we're talking football, a lot of returning guys on the offensive side of the ball. I saw a lot. I really liked that scrimmage that was last Friday. And the interesting thing about high school, especially Yankton, not just especially Yankton, all high school athletics, is you really don't know what you're going to get, considering it's not a matter of recruitment or what was your recruiting class this year. It's what kids are growing up. What next grade level has jumped up? Can you rely on more sophomores, the underclassmen? What does your upperclassmen look like? And so that's the unique thing is you really can see the future Bucks, little Marshall over there, future Buck. But that's an interesting thing. So I really can't tell you, there's gonna be a new quarterback situation for Yankton. And I think it's gonna be a much more run-heavy offense this season. But hopefully behind a more veteran offensive line, they'll do really well.
Well, South Dakota State, 2-time national defending champions. I think they're going to be okay. I was a media day, got a chance to look around. I mean, I think back to when we went on the road with them, our first trip to Georgia Southern, who was a FCS power, and you walk in that stadium, they had 6 national championship flags flying. And I think the Jacks got beat 60-6 that day. And they were down to like a 6th-string running back that we had no idea who it was on the roster. And to think how far they've come from there to now, the talent level has been, is phenomenal. The stadium, the changes up there, I mean, just the whole program has reversed itself. And because football used to be an add-on, it was kind of the market between basketball seasons. And now football led the way into the D1 transition. So, yeah, they have the Walter Payton Player of the Year, Mark Gronowski coming back. He's bulked up. He looked pretty good. They have 3 or 4 tight ends that look amazing. The running back room is full. Their defense, everybody says, well, that's a question. I don't think so. I mean, they look pretty good. So, yeah, 2-time defending champion. I think they'll be okay. So, yeah, we're looking forward to Oklahoma State Saturday. They're 9-point underdog, but we'll see. If they can play close, that'd be good.
Well, with no team to cover these days, I do have a 40-season streak of doing at least one high school football game, and this is when I was, I think unemployed in the fall of 1992. I did a playoff game for a pure radio station, but if there's something out there that if they'll have a almost 65-year-old guy doing a game or something like that, that's something I probably would look forward to at least this fall.
And for me, it's kind of a unique situation because yes, I'm the sports editor, but typically I'm not the guy covering the game. I'm the guy on the sidelines with the camera. In part because half the time I have to rush back to the office and put together the paper. That's one of those things that thankfully we still do locally, because you guys talked about some of the other papers in the state. Not everybody is putting together. The Sioux Falls paper is not put together in Sioux Falls. It's put together in Des Moines. Same thing with Aberdeen and Watertown. And because of that, their deadlines are ridiculously early. And I'm not ready to do that. We still value the print product. So that means that, okay, like last Friday, I was in Freeman for a 9-man game. I shot the first quarter, got in the car, headed back to the office, and ran the office the rest of the night. Friday night, that's what I'll do with the Bucks game. I'll shoot a quarter and a half, head back to the office, get my photos done, start typing games, and hopefully get them done in time to get them in print. But and USD is the one I'll be doing Thursday. I did get to see their media day. I think they're going to be good. They're going to be good again. Lots of talent coming back. Again, they say the same thing about USD that they're saying about SDSU, that a lot of question marks on defense, and I'd say the same thing you said about SDSU, that they're not necessarily question marks. You just don't know the names yet. So I think USD is going to be pretty good. They should handle Northern on Thursday. The following week at Camp Randall, that could be a little more interesting. But I think USD is going to have another good season, and looking forward to being on the sidelines for it.
Ken, did you think of a question yet? Rich, you have one?
You two, you're fairly new at all this. How'd you get introduced to the coaches, and you go to the practices and watch everything they do?
Well, how did I get introduced to kind of start this job in general? Well, I moved to Yankton. I met my wife, who was just in here with our 2 children. And she's a teacher at Yankton High School, and started working for James. And then went to KVHT for about a year, and then I was hired at KYNT as sports director. As far as getting to know coaches, through the job mainly, getting interviews and stuff, but then it also does help having a wife in the school district as well, so you can kind of get to know these coaches from 2 different levels, and I guess that just really helps. But you just want to maintain those relationships, and don't be afraid to ask them extra questions. They want their sport covered just like anyone else does.
Yeah, when it comes to meeting the coaches at Mount Marty, for me, obviously, it was just a couple of years ago. When I first came over to Mount Marty, I didn't know any of them, and I just kind of met them through the job. I got to know them on the road trips. When I'm on the bus, I'd sit and talk to the coach for 2-3 hours as we're driving, or 5, and when we went to James stuff. So you get to know them pretty well then. Now that I do know all of the coaches, it kind of changed for future years, because when a new coach is hired, the very first thing I do is ask for their phone number, and I go and I get on the phone and I call them and say, hey, congrats on the job at Mount Marty, and I look forward to working with you. This is who I am. This is some of the coverage we're going to be giving you, and we're going to be seeing a lot of each other. I did that most recently in one of our sports that we cover a lot with the women's basketball program, and Alan Bertram, the new head coach there, he's been great. Very first day, as soon as that was official, I had already known and had his number, and as soon as it was official, I just give him a call and say, hey, congrats, I'm looking forward to working with you. And it's always a good way to launch a career, or launch a connection. Thank you.
Do you go to the practices?
Sometimes, yes. I've definitely gone to practices, especially in the beginning of the season usually. A lot of the time I'll go to Mount Marty just had their spring game in April, and then they have their scrimmage with Dakota State on Thursday, and I was absolutely at both of those.
I forgot that part of your question. I also go to practices, go to Bucks football practice, usually a couple times a week. I've gone to Bucks basketball practice, get some interviews and check on things there. Go to soccer practice quite often. The wife is a volunteer assistant coach. She used to be the assistant coach for the state championship Gazelles team. And so I just like to stay around the coaches and just the teams in general, and not necessarily just from my job standpoint, just to be around the usually really great groups of kids.
How many are on your staff, James?
Well, right now, it's Alex and I with 2 players to be named later. Trying to find a couple of part-timers, but right now, our current staffing would be 2 full-time, 2 part-time. The full-time position, when I started, I had part-time. That was all I had. Jeremy was actually my first full-time assistant, and he carried my butt for a long time. But I've got another great young man working for me now, and hoping to find a couple young people who want to, if not do sports for a living, do sports for some form of paycheck.
Since we're in Yankton, what do you guys think of the Yankton Quarterback Club? Think it's helpful, it's good?
I really enjoy the food. Big fan of the Yankton Quarterback Club food. No, I think it's a great club, and every time a speaker comes in, almost without fail, they mention that those clubs are becoming fewer and far between. They're starting to dwindle out a little bit, but Yankton seems to be still holding strong and giving younger members, new members. I try to go as much as I can, or Tehl does as well, and it's nice to sometimes go to events like that and not necessarily have an agenda, try to get interviews, but just to listen to other coaches, maybe from even sports or schools you have no affiliation with, and just see their perspective on things. The more knowledge, the better, in my opinion. And everyone at this table said at some point, just a sense of community.
Yeah, I like talking with the Yankton coaches when I'm there. I don't cover a whole lot of Yankton high school athletics. I cover a lot of Mount Marty athletics. So obviously I see those coaches there, but every now and then I get to run into one of the Yankton high school coaches and I get to talk to them for just a little bit. And I don't get to cover them very often. So that's kind of fun, just to get an update on somebody I don't get to see as often. So I like the quarterback club as well.
Yeah, I've been
You did. I got it.
You did. Nice. Yeah, I've been a member for a long time, and I try to, and being retired now, I can make most of the meetings, which I really enjoy. And I enjoy hanging out with the old dudes. Suddenly I'm one of them. And yeah, the coaches that come in and everything, and it's good to get they do a really good job of getting the coaches from all over the region. South Dakota State, Jimmy Rogers will be down on the 11th. I know, so he's always interesting, and the other coaches, they got the Augie coach after that. So yeah, I think it's great. The fundraising is great. They help pay for the athletic banquets, I think, for both Mount Marty and Yankton High School. And there's other fundraising involved in there. I know they got some raffles coming up to raise some more money, so for scholarships. And yeah, I think they do a lot of good. And they're in, 70th year now, something like that. So yeah, it's a great organization.
Yeah, I just echo what these guys said. It's a great community organization that has done a lot of good for Yankton athletics and Mount Marty athletics.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Tehl, Bryce, Jerry, Joe, and James for coming down and making this happen, and everybody who followed online. I know we had a few people that were following, no questions, but it's good to get a sense of the unique media landscape as we talked about.